Picture a map, not the kind you pull up on your phone, a real one, ink on parchment, edges curling from salt air, coastlines drawn by men who watched their friends die to get the measurements right. Now, zoom out. It is the year 1740, and the British Royal Navy controls more ocean than any force in human history. Their ships stretch from the frozen coasts of Newfoundland, down through the Caribbean, around the Horn of Africa, and deep into the Indian Ocean. The map is covered in British red: ports, trade routes, naval bases. An empire held together not by roads or railroads, but by wooden ships and the men unlucky enough to serve on them. But here is the part the maps never show you. Below the deck of every single one of those ships, something is going very, very wrong. Sailors are losing their minds, not in a poetic, romantic, staring at the horizon kind of way. They are pulling their own teeth out because scurvy has turned their gums into mush. They are hallucinating after weeks of drinking water so rancid it has turned green and started moving on its own. They are getting into knife fights over a cup of rum at 4 in the morning because alcohol is the only thing keeping them from jumping overboard. The greatest navy the world has ever seen is being destroyed from the inside, not by enemy cannons, not by storms, by the simple, brutal reality that the human body was never designed to spend months floating on salt water with nothing decent to drink. And the solution? The thing that saved the Royal Navy, changed the course of naval warfare, and accidentally created one of the most famous drinks in history? It was not some brilliant piece of engineering. It was not a new weapon or a faster ship. It was a grumpy old admiral mixing rum with water and lime juice. This is the story of Grog, the drink the Navy invented to stop pirates and sailors from going completely insane, and how a cocktail recipe ended up shaping the fate of empires. Let's go back to the beginning, the problem nobody wanted to talk about. To understand why grog mattered, you first have to understand what life was actually like for sailors in the Age of Sail. And I am not talking about the Hollywood version with Johnny Depp swinging from ropes and cracking jokes. The real thing was closer to a floating prison sentence that you might not survive. A typical naval voyage in the 1700s could last anywhere from a few weeks to over a year. Ships carried crews of anywhere from 50 to over 800 men, depending on the vessel. And every single one of those men needed to eat and drink every single day. That sounds obvious, but when you are thousands of miles from the nearest port, keeping hundreds of men fed and hydrated becomes the single most important logistical challenge of the entire operation. And the biggest problem was water. Fresh water does not stay fresh, not on a wooden ship in tropical heat. The Royal Navy stored water in wooden casks, and within a few weeks of leaving port, that water started to turn. Algae grew in it. Bacteria multiplied. The water went from clear to cloudy to green to something that looked and smelled like swamp runoff. Sailors described it as slimy, thick, and so foul that you had to hold your nose just to choke it down. But they drank it anyway, because the alternative was dying of thirst. Now the Navy knew about this problem. They had known about it for centuries. And their solution was elegant in its simplicity. If the water is going to go bad, just give the men something that does not go bad: alcohol. Specifically, beer was the original drink of the British sailor. Every man in the Royal Navy was entitled to a gallon of beer per day. A full gallon, that is 8 pints, every single day. The logic was straightforward. Beer had enough alcohol to resist spoilage, it provided some calories, and it kept morale from collapsing entirely. But beer had its own problems. It was heavy. It took up enormous amounts of storage space, and on long voyages to the Caribbean or the Pacific, even beer would eventually go off. You simply could not carry enough of it. So as British naval operations expanded further and further from home, the Navy started looking for alternatives. And they found one in the Caribbean: rum. the rum ration and the chaos it created. When the British started establishing colonies in the Caribbean in the early 1600s, they discovered that the sugar plantations were producing something interesting as a byproduct. Molasses, the thick, dark syrup left over from refining sugar, could be fermented and distilled into a powerful spirit. The locals called it rumbullion, which eventually got shortened to rum. Rum was, from a naval logistics perspective, almost perfect. It was incredibly strong, usually around 80 proof or higher, which meant it would never spoil. It was compact. A single cask of rum took up far less space than the equivalent amount of beer and lasted indefinitely. And the Caribbean was full of the stuff. Ships could resupply easily at any British port in the West Indies. By 1655, the Royal Navy had officially replaced the daily beer ration with rum for ships serving in the Caribbean. Each sailor received half a pint of neat rum per day. That is about 240 milliliters of spirit that was at least 40% alcohol, issued twice a day, once at noon and once in the evening. And this is where things started to go sideways. Half a pint of strong rum, drunk neat, on an empty or near-empty stomach, twice a day, turned out to be a spectacularly bad idea. The sailors were not sipping it casually with dinner. They were slamming it. Many of them saved up their rations, traded with other sailors, or gambled for extra portions. Some men were consuming the equivalent of a full bottle of rum in a single sitting. The results were exactly what you would expect. Fights broke out constantly. Discipline collapsed. Sailors fell from the rigging because they could not see straight. Men passed out on watch, leaving ships vulnerable to attack. Officers reported finding crew members unconscious in pools of their own vomit at all hours of the day. In some cases, entire watches were too drunk to respond to emergencies. And it was not just a discipline problem, it was a tactical disaster. A drunk crew could not effectively sail a ship, much less fight a battle. The Royal Navy was supposed to be the most professional fighting force on the ocean, and half their sailors could barely stand up by mid-afternoon. Meanwhile, the pirates were having the same problem, but with even less restraint. Pirate ships had no formal rationing system. When they captured a merchant vessel, the first thing they went for was the alcohol. Rum, wine, brandy, whatever was in the hold. And unlike Navy ships, there was no officer enforcing discipline or limiting consumption. Pirates drank until the supply ran out, and then they went looking for more. The famous pirate Blackbeard was known for drinking a mixture of rum and gunpowder, which he claimed made him fiercer in battle. Whether it made him fiercer is debatable. What it definitely made him was unpredictable, violent, and eventually dead. The pirate Captain Charles Vane lost his entire crew not to the Navy, but to infighting fueled by drunken arguments over how to divide captured goods. The Pirate Republic of Nassau in the Bahamas, which at its peak was home to over 1,000 pirates, was described by contemporaries as a place of near-constant drunken violence. Alcohol was supposed to be the thing that made life at sea bearable. Instead, it was tearing both the Navy and the pirates apart from the inside. Something had to change. Enter Admiral Vernon. Edward Vernon was not what you would call a likable man. He was stubborn, opinionated, loud, and had a habit of writing very long, very angry letters to anyone who disagreed with him. He spent almost as much time fighting with his own government as he did fighting the Spanish. But he was also one of the most effective naval commanders of his generation. And more importantly, he actually cared about the men serving under him. Vernon was born in 1684 into a well-connected family. His father was a politician, and young Edward was essentially destined for either Parliament or the Navy. He chose the Navy, and by his mid-20s, he was already commanding his own ship. He fought in several major engagements, earned a reputation for aggressive tactics, and eventually rose to the rank of Vice Admiral. By 1739, Vernon was commanding the British Naval Squadron in the Caribbean, based in Jamaica. This put him in direct contact with two things. First, the Spanish, who controlled much of Central and South America and were the primary naval adversary. Second, the daily reality of what rum was doing to his crews. Vernon had watched good sailors, men who could navigate by the stars, tie any knot, and fight with precision, turn into stumbling, unreliable liabilities by lunchtime. He had seen promising young officers drink themselves into early graves. He had buried men who fell from masts, drowned in calm seas, or were killed in stupid, avoidable accidents that all traced back to one thing: neat rum. Vernon decided to do something about it, and on August 21, 1740, he issued what would become one of the most consequential orders in naval history. Captain's Order Number 349. The order was straightforward. From that day forward, the daily rum ration would no longer be served neat. Instead, it would be mixed with water at a ratio of 4 parts water to 1 part rum. The mixture would be prepared in a communal tub on deck, in full view of the crew, twice a day. And crucially, it would be consumed immediately. No saving it, no trading it, no hoarding it for a binge later. The sailors were furious. The birth of Grog Vernon's nickname among the sailors was Old Grog, a reference to the grogram cloak he wore on deck, a coarse fabric made of silk, mohair, and wool that was stiffened with gum. It was not a flattering nickname. Grogram was cheap, rough material, and calling someone Old Grog was basically calling them a stiff, unpleasant old man. So when Vernon ordered them to water down their rum, the sailors named the diluted drink after him: Grog. It was not a compliment, it was an insult. They were saying this drink was as unpleasant as the man who forced them to drink it. But here is what happened next. The initial recipe was simple: 4 parts water, 1 part rum, mixed in a large tub called a scuttlebutt. But Vernon, whether by design or happy accident, also encouraged adding other ingredients. Lime juice and sugar were the most common additions. Some ships added lemon juice instead. Others used whatever citrus was available. Vernon wrote in his order that the addition of sugar and lime would make the mixture, and I am paraphrasing here, more palatable and wholesome for the men. Whether he truly understood the medical significance of what he was doing is a matter of historical debate. But the lime juice was about to become the most important ingredient in the entire recipe. Because lime juice contains vitamin C, and vitamin C prevents scurvy. Scurvy was, without exaggeration, the single deadliest enemy the Royal Navy ever faced. It killed more sailors than combat, storms, and accidents combined. Between 1500 and 1800, it is estimated that scurvy killed over 2 million sailors worldwide. During some long voyages, scurvy would kill half the crew or more before they ever reached their destination. The symptoms were horrifying. It started with fatigue and weakness. Then your gums would swell and bleed. Your teeth would loosen and fall out. Old wounds that had healed years ago would reopen. Your skin would bruise at the slightest touch. Eventually, you would bleed internally, your organs would fail, and you would die. And nobody knew what caused it. For centuries, doctors blamed everything from laziness to bad air to divine punishment. The actual cause, a deficiency in vitamin C, would not be scientifically confirmed until the 20th century. But some observant sailors and doctors had noticed that eating citrus fruits seemed to help. The problem was that fresh fruit did not last any longer than fresh water on a ship. Vernon's grog changed that equation. By mixing lime juice into the daily rum ration, he was essentially forcing every sailor to consume vitamin C twice a day without even realizing it. The rum preserved the juice, the water diluted the alcohol, and the sugar made the whole thing drinkable. It was, accidentally or not, one of the most important public health interventions in maritime history. Within months of implementing the grog ration, ships under Vernon's command saw dramatic improvements. Scurvy cases dropped. Discipline improved because the men were no longer blackout drunk by noon. Morale actually went up because even though the rum was weaker, the grog was served as a communal ritual that gave the sailors something to look forward to. The Navy noticed. Grog goes official. The results from Vernon's squadron were impossible to ignore. Ships that adopted the Grog ration had healthier crews, fewer disciplinary problems, and better combat readiness than ships that were still issuing neat rum. In 1756, the Admiralty made it official. The Grog ration was mandated across the entire Royal Navy. Every ship, every sailor, every day. 4 parts water, 1 part rum, with lime juice added as a standard ingredient. The mixture was to be prepared on deck and consumed under supervision. The Navy also formalized the ritual around it. The bosun's mate would pipe up spirits at noon, which was the signal for the grog to be prepared and served. The entire crew would line up, receive their portion, and drink it on the spot. It became one of the defining daily rituals of naval life, as important to the sailors as any religious service or battle drill. And the impact on naval effectiveness was staggering. The British Navy of the late 1700s was qualitatively different from the Navy of the early 1700s, and grog was a significant part of the reason. Crews were healthier, they could stay at sea longer without being decimated by scurvy. They were alert and functional during combat. They could maintain watches and respond to emergencies. This mattered enormously during the great naval conflicts of the era. During the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution, and most importantly, the Napoleonic Wars, the Royal Navy's ability to keep large fleets operational for extended periods at sea was a decisive strategic advantage. French and Spanish ships frequently had to return to port because their crews were sick or dying. British ships, fueled by grog and protected by its vitamin C content, could stay on station for months. Admiral Horatio Nelson, the most famous naval commander in British history, was a firm believer in the grog ration. His crews at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805 were among the healthiest in the fleet, and their performance reflected it. Nelson died at Trafalgar, shot by a French musketeer. His body was preserved for the voyage home in a barrel of brandy. Some accounts say the sailors tapped the barrel and drank from it during the journey. The story is almost certainly a myth, but the fact that it became a legend tells you everything about the relationship between the Royal Navy and alcohol. What the pirates missed. Now, here is where the story gets interesting from a pirate perspective. The golden age of piracy, roughly 1650 to 1730, overlapped almost perfectly with the period when the Navy was struggling with its alcohol problem. And many pirates were former Navy sailors. They had deserted, been dismissed, or simply decided that piracy offered better pay and more freedom than serving the crown. But when these men left the Navy, they left behind whatever discipline the service had provided. And without the structure of the grog ration, without the controlled distribution, without officers enforcing limits, pirate crews were essentially free to drink themselves to death. And many of them did. The popular image of the jolly, rum-drinking pirate is not entirely wrong. Pirates did drink enormous quantities of rum, but the reality was far less romantic than the stories suggest. Bartholomew Roberts, one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age, actually tried to impose drinking rules on his crew. His articles, the pirate code that every man signed when joining the crew, included a provision that the lights and candles should be put out at 8 at night. And if any of the crew desired to drink after that hour, they should sit upon the open deck without lights. Roberts understood that uncontrolled drinking was a threat to his operation. But Roberts was the exception. Most pirate captains either could not or would not control their crew's drinking, and the consequences were severe. Calico Jack Rackham, one of the most famous pirates of the era, was captured by pirate hunter Jonathan Barnett in 1720 specifically because his crew was too drunk to fight. When Barnett's sloop approached, Rackham's men were below deck, passed out or incapacitated from an evening of heavy drinking. According to trial testimony, only 2 members of the crew actually fought back. Anne Bonny and Mary Red, the 2 most famous female pirates in history, were reportedly the only ones sober enough to pick up weapons. After Rackham was captured and sentenced to hang, Anne Bonny supposedly told him that if he had fought like a man, he would not have had to die like a dog. The implication was clear. His drinking had killed him more surely than any noose. The pirate Edward Lowe, one of the most brutal captains of the era, was known for making terrible decisions while drunk. He once tortured and killed a captured captain over an imagined insult that nobody else witnessed or understood. His crew eventually mutinied against him, likely because his drunken violence had become too unpredictable even for pirates. The pattern repeated across the Golden Age. Samuel Bellamy, Stade Bonnet, Charles Vane. Time and again, pirate captains and crews were undone not by the Navy's superior firepower, but by their own inability to manage alcohol. If the pirates had adopted something like grog, if they had diluted their rum, added citrus, imposed some kind of rationing system, the history of piracy might have played out very differently. Healthier crews with better discipline could have evaded capture for far longer. They might have avoided the scurvy that weakened them on long voyages. They might have made better tactical decisions in moments that mattered. But discipline was antithetical to the entire pirate enterprise. They had left the Navy to escape rules like the ones Vernon imposed. The freedom to drink whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, was part of the appeal. It was also part of the reason most pirates did not last very long. The science. Nobody understood yet. The full picture of why grog worked so well did not come together until much later. Vernon did not know about vitamin C. He did not understand bacterial contamination of water. He just knew that his men were healthier and better behaved when they drank the mixture instead of neat rum. But the science, once it was eventually worked out, was remarkable. The alcohol in the rum served as a mild preservative for the water, slowing bacterial growth. The lime juice provided ascorbic acid, which the human body cannot produce on its own and must get from food. Without it, collagen synthesis breaks down, which is what causes the horrific symptoms of scurvy. The sugar provided quick energy for men doing intense physical labor, and the dilution reduced the alcohol to something closer to a strong beer, enough for a mild mood lift without destroying cognitive function. In 1747, a Scottish naval surgeon named James Lind conducted what is considered one of the first clinical trials in medical history. Aboard the HMS Salisbury, Lind took 12 scurvy patients and divided them into 6 pairs, giving each pair a different treatment: cider, sulfuric acid, vinegar, seawater, herbs, and citrus fruit. The 2 sailors given oranges and lemons recovered within a week. Everyone else continued to deteriorate. Lind published his findings in 1753, but the Admiralty was slow to act. It took another 40 years before the Navy officially mandated lime juice as standard. By that time, Vernon's grog had already been providing citrus supplementation for decades. This is where the term limey comes from. British sailors were called limeys because of their lime juice consumption. It was meant as an insult, but it was essentially making fun of the British for being healthier than everyone else at sea. The Spanish and French never systematized citrus supplementation the way the British did, and their crews paid the price. The grog ration, born from a grumpy admiral's frustration with drunk sailors, had accidentally given the Royal Navy a massive strategic advantage that would persist for over a century. The ritual and its meaning grog was never just a drink. It was a ritual, an institution, and in many ways, the glue that held shipboard society together. The daily issuing of grog, the up-spirit ceremony, was the social highlight of the sailors' day. It was when men gathered, talked, shared news, settled disputes, and reinforced the bonds that kept a crew functional during months at sea with no shore leave and no contact with the outside world. The scuttlebutt, the tub in which grog was mixed, became so associated with conversation and gossip that the word itself entered the English language. When someone today says they heard something through the scuttlebutt, they are unknowingly referencing the grog tub on an 18th century warship. Even the phrase groggy comes directly from grog. A man who had drunk too much grog was described as groggy, meaning unsteady, dazed, and confused. The word has survived for nearly 300 years and is still used every day by people who have no idea they are referencing Vice Admiral Edward Vernon's watered-down rum. The grog ration also served as currency and social control. A well-behaved sailor might receive an extra ration as reward. A troublemaker might have his ration withheld, which was called being stopped of grog and was considered one of the worst penalties short of flogging. The threat of losing your grog was often more effective than physical punishment. Officers, of course, had their own drinking arrangements. The wardroom on a naval vessel was essentially a private club where officers drank wine, port, and better quality spirits. The class divide between officers and enlisted men was reflected in what they drank. But even officers recognized the importance of grog to the functioning of the ship. A captain who messed with the grog ration without good reason risked a mutiny far more surely than one who issued extra duties or reduced food portions. The long decline. The grog ration survived in one form or another for over 230 years. It outlasted the age of sail, the Napoleonic Wars, 2 World Wars, and the transition from wooden ships to steel dreadnoughts to nuclear submarines. But it was always under pressure. The temperance movement of the 19th century viewed the Navy's alcohol ration as an embarrassment. Religious groups and social reformers argued that any amount of alcohol was degrading and unnecessary. They pointed to the American Navy, which had abolished its grog ration in 1862, as proof that a modern Navy could function without alcohol. The strength of the ration was gradually reduced over the decades. The original ratio was weakened further. The total rum amount was cut. Twice daily service was reduced to once a day. By the mid-20th century, the grog ration was a shadow of what Vernon had created, but it persisted. Through both world wars, British sailors still received their daily tot of rum. During the Battle of the Atlantic, when convoys were being savaged by German U-boats, sailors would receive their grog ration before going on watch, knowing that a torpedo could hit at any moment. The rum was a link to centuries of tradition, a reminder that they were part of something larger than themselves. In 1969, a parliamentary question was raised about whether the rum ration was appropriate for a modern Navy. An internal study concluded that daily alcohol was incompatible with complex modern weapon systems: radar, sonar, guided missiles, nuclear reactors. A drunk sailor in 1740 might fall from the rigging. A drunk sailor in 1970 might accidentally launch a torpedo. The decision was made. July 31, 1970 was designated as the last day the Royal Navy would issue the rum ration. It was called Black Tot Day, and the Navy treated it like a funeral. Across ships and shore bases around the world, sailors gathered for the final up spirits call. Many wore black armbands. Some held mock funeral processions, carrying the rum cask draped in a flag. Toasts were made, old songs were sung, and at the end, the grog was poured, drunk, and the centuries-old tradition was finished. Some sailors tipped their last tot overboard as a tribute to the sea. Others saved a small amount in sealed containers, creating what became known as black tot bottles. These sealed portions of the last officially issued Royal Navy rum have become collector's items. In recent years, individual bottles have sold at auction for thousands of dollars. The Royal Navy Rum Committee used the remaining surplus rum stocks to create a blended product that is still sold commercially under the brand name Pusser's Rum. The recipe is said to be based on the original Admiralty blend, and a portion of the proceeds goes to naval charities. The legacy you drink today. The story of grog did not end on Black Tot Day. It just changed form. The grog recipe, rum diluted with water and citrus, is the direct ancestor of some of the most popular cocktails in the world. The daiquiri, the mojito, the dark and stormy, the rum punch, and virtually every tiki drink you have ever encountered all trace their lineage back to the basic grog formula. Rum, citrus, sweetener, dilution. The proportions change. The presentation gets fancier. But the core concept is exactly what Vernon ordered his sailors to drink in 1740. The gimlet, traditionally made with gin and lime cordial, was created for the same reason as grog. British officers in the 19th century were required to consume lime juice to prevent scurvy, and they mixed it with gin to make it palatable. The drink was named after Rear Admiral Sir Thomas Desmond Gimlet, who supposedly insisted that his officers drink the mixture. Tiki culture, the mid-20th century American phenomenon of Polynesian-themed bars with elaborate rum cocktails, was built on the romanticized image of the rum-drinking sailor. Trader Vic and Don the Beachcomber, the two figures who invented tiki bars, were obsessed with naval history and Caribbean rum traditions. The Mai Tai, the Zombie, the Scorpion. All variations on the fundamental grog idea. Strong rum, tamed by dilution and citrus. Even the modern craft cocktail movement owes a debt to grog. The emphasis on fresh citrus, proper dilution, balanced sweetness, and quality spirits that defines contemporary mixology is a refinement of the principles Vernon stumbled onto almost 300 years ago. And the connection to pirate culture is everywhere. Every pirate-themed restaurant, every Halloween costume with a rum bottle, every Talk Like a Pirate Day celebration, every time someone shouts, "Yo ho ho," and a bottle of rum at a costume party. They are participating in a cultural tradition that traces directly back to the Caribbean rum trade and the Navy's attempts to manage it. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1883, cemented the image of the rum-drinking pirate forever. The famous shanty, 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum, became the defining anthem of pirate fiction. Every pirate movie, book, game, and theme park since then has included rum as a central element. But here is the thing people forget. The pirates did not invent rum drinking at sea. The Navy did. The pirates just did it without the discipline, the rationing, the lime juice, and the structure that turned a destructive habit into a strategic advantage. Grog was never glamorous. It was never meant to be. It was a practical solution to a deadly problem invented by an unpopular admiral who cared more about results than about being liked. It tasted acceptable at best and awful at worst, depending on the quality of the rum, the freshness of the water, and how many days the limes had been sitting in the hold. But it worked. It kept sailors alive when everything else on the ship was trying to kill them. It gave the Royal Navy an edge that lasted for more than a century. It accidentally solved one of the worst medical mysteries in maritime history. And it created a cultural legacy that stretches from the wooden decks of 18th century warships to the bamboo bars of modern tiki lounges. So the next time someone hands you a rum cocktail with lime, remember where it came from. Not from a beach resort, not from a cocktail book. From a tub on the deck of a warship mixed under the watchful eye of a bosun's mate, served to men who had not seen land in months and might never see it again. That is the real story of grog. And honestly, for a drink invented by a guy whose nickname meant he dressed like a burlap sack, it did pretty well for itself. Anyway, that is that. If you made it this far, subscribe. I cover pirate history every week. And if you want to see how the Navy finally caught Blackbeard, that video is on screen right now.